Plan and perform vCenter Server and ESXi Upgrades. Well, this is number 20, our final video together. And in this final video, we touch on, I guess, one of the topics that is of minimal interest to you if you have no vCenter or ESXi, and of maximal interest to you if you already do. For those of us that have ESX in version 4 or previous versions, getting us up to the more recent version with vSphere 5 is going to be the very first process that you're going to do to bring it into production. And doing so requires a series of steps that really have to be completed in the proper order if you're to do everything successfully. And that's really the case because there are so many elements that are versions within a vCenter environment. So you've got the virtual machines, you've got the virtual machine hardware versions, you've got the VMware tools versions on those virtual machines, you've got the ESXi hosts, and you've got vCenter Server itself. You've even got plugins and any VMware solutions that you're using to augment your vSphere environment. So all of these really require attention and a plan of action if you're to go through the upgrade successfully. Now, I will tell you here that there's not much to see as far as an upgrade is concerned. So, I mean, I can show you how an installation works. I can let you see once again how ESXi actually goes through an installation. But I think at this point, this is probably less interesting to you than really understanding what the quote-unquote official upgrade process is, as I've got here, and then also figuring out what your options are for getting those ESXi hosts updated. And I put this, and I kind of constrained this video down into just these specific elements because really, at this point, you have the understanding that you need in order to accomplish most of these tasks. You really, at this point, need to understand, well, what is the order in order to accomplish them? Now, the official upgrade process, and this comes from VMware's guide to upgrading itself, the official upgrade process begins with a verification that any of the VMware solutions, so the add-on things, or any vCenter Server plugins that you have are compatible with this new version, version 5. So you'll want to make sure that those plugins are indeed compatible. Get rid of them if they're not, upgrade them if they are. And then also verify that your vCenter Server, the hardware itself, meets the hardware and software requirements. I'll even argue here that your ESXi hosts meet the hardware and software requirements as well. So there's a couple of verification tasks here that just ensure that what you have is sufficient to support this new version. Once you've done that verification, once you're ready to go, the first step in the process is really going through an upgrade of vCenter Server. And you've been through a software upgrade before. It's a very simple next finish. And getting that vCenter Server and its database and also the information that makes up the server side itself is really the first step in this process because that vCenter Server and updating it is what brings you into this new VMware Update Manager. Now, the VMware Update Manager is, for most of us, the tool that we will use to orchestrate the update of the ESXi hosts that we have. And for a lot of us, the reason for that is just simply because it makes things very easy. If you have the Update Manager up and running, well, then you can just create a baseline that is the new version of ESXi and deploy that baseline out to the hosts that you want. Once you have that VMware Update Manager and once you have vCenter Server updated, obviously the next step there is to actually go through upgrading those ESXi hosts. Now, I'll tell you, this is something that you're going to want to do in a measured fashion, right? You do have virtual machines, you have virtual appliances, and you have all these different assets that you want to maintain their availability during the process or during the steps that are involved to get those hosts updated from one version to another. I might add that as you're going through this process, if you're one of those individuals that's gone ahead and removed or set up HA with in ways that you don't have the ability to move virtual machines around and empty out a host entirely, well, you may want to add additional hardware or shut down virtual machines so that you can keep enough of those VMs up and running during this host update process. Upgrading ESXi can be done through one of many different ways. Many of them are very manual in nature. Others are a little bit easier to do. I'm going to explain one in detail and then just show you what the other ones are, or talk about what the other ones are, because the other ones, you have either already seen them or it's something you may or may not even do. Obviously, the most trivial of all of these is just simply upgrading those hosts interactively, one at a time, from the DVD media that you have, or USB media, or whatever media is available to you. This is no different than putting the media in the drive and then booting off the disk and then installing ESX just like you did before in one of the earliest nuggets in this series. And so that process does indeed upgrade the host. Obviously, make sure that you've evacuated those virtual machines off first so that you have a clean upgrade path and you don't have to worry about there being any virtual machines around and accidentally making any mistakes with those virtual machines. There are two other upgrade processes that you can go through, both via an unattended installation and through the use of ESX CLI commands. And I kind of minimized these. They were somewhat valuable in version 4 because the ability to do unattended installation of ESX became useful as the size of an environment got very large. These two techniques are becoming less and less valuable these days because of the built-in automations that one gets through the tool, for example, the vSphere Update Manager. Now, this tool allows you to perform that fairly nice orchestrated upgrade across the hosts that you have, and you'll find that, well, it probably does exactly what you need it to do, just in the same way that it's done with the patches and the updates that you've applied with it in previous nuggets. There is one final solution that you can use, and that's using a new technology called vSphere Auto Deploy. And I'm not going to get into too much detail with vSphere Auto Deploy because it requires some command line work that can be a bit complicated. So the difficulty is a bit out of scope for this training. But Auto Deploy is a fairly intelligent solution that VMware has put together that effectively creates these stateless servers that exist in your environment that boot via DHCP, via a TFTP server, grab their configuration from a central repository, and then put the whole thing in RAM and then operate just like a vSphere ESX, or just like an ESX server normally would. Now, if you power these things down, there's nothing on the machines. Their entire operating system is more or less exists in RAM. So auto deploy is for this appliance type operating system that ESX is kind of intelligent because it again allows you to create this environment where the machine is nothing until it's booted, and then once it's booted, it takes whatever sort of baseline that you've applied to it. Again, a fairly complex topic because there are a lot of pieces that have to be connected together in order to orchestrate that for happening. So I'm not going to show you exactly how auto deploy works here, but be aware that it is an option for you if you have the right hardware and other elements set up in your environment. Once you've decided what your options are for upgrading those ESXi hosts, and you've actually gone about upgrading them, you got two steps left. One of which is to reapply the host licenses. That's a fairly trivial process. And then the next is to upgrade the virtual machines and or the virtual appliances. Remember that the virtual machines have a virtual machine hardware version and also a VMware tools version that need to be upgraded. As both of these things need to be upgraded. And I'll show you two ways in which you can accomplish this, or one way that you can accomplish this for both of those elements using the vSphere Update Manager. So with this in mind, let's actually go back to our server here, a same server throughout this entire series, and we're taking a look at our cluster. We've got our 3 hosts there and our virtual machines. And I want to go back to actually the Update Manager tool that we had worked with before when we were talking about adding patches and things to virtual machines. Now, I've put over here the ESXi Images tab that we actually glossed over back in that earlier nugget. And as you can see here, I've actually already imported in an ESXi image. Now, this is just the based image. I mean, there's nothing really interesting to see here. I've created here a baseline called Our Golden ESXi Image. So I have essentially downloaded this off of VMware's website. I have imported this in using the Import ESXi Image wizard screen here, and then ultimately created a baseline out of this image. Now, what's interesting about this image is that when it comes time for you to actually deploy this, you can actually deploy ESXi very similar to how you would go about deploying really any image that's out there. If you take a look over here on baselines and groups, you see that our golden ESXi image has actually been created and can be potentially tagged to a machine, a host that we have, so that when it comes time for its next remediation cycle, it'll actually go about installing what this ESXi image is. In fact, let me go back over here to Inventory and Hosts and Clusters, and we'll take a look at one of the hosts here. you'll see that against one of these hosts, the Update Manager tab, I have the ability, just like before, to attach another baseline to this host to have it make sure that it corresponds to the baseline. Now these hosts are the same version as the version of ESXi that I'm attempting to install here, so I'm going to maintain the baseline. But as you can see here, if I click the attach button, I have available to me an upgrade baseline here called Our Golden ESXi Image, which is that host upgrade. If I attach this, you'll notice that, well, this computer is currently compliant to this image. Now if it weren't compliant to this image, the next process or the next time that it goes through that remediation process, perhaps automatically, or if I right-clicked and then chose to remediate this server, it would actually go about installing this image and upgrading this machine to ESXi version 5. Now what's great about this solution is the fact that because you are leveraging your Update Manager infrastructure, all of the configuration items that you've set here in terms of your host and cluster settings and the download settings and the notification check schedule, and all of that stuff, which has already been configured for your environment, the upgrade process will actually respect these settings so that the upgrade goes by more or less seamlessly. So really intelligent way for doing this whole upgrade of your environment from version 4 to version 5 or previous versions. And all of it is really predicated around having that vSphere client that's out there and upgraded to the right version first. Now there is, however, another thing that's required, as I said earlier on, that after the ESXi installation is complete, that there are some other tasks, right? We have to make sure that we have the right hardware version. We have to make sure that we have the right software version, the right VMware Tools versions that are associated with those virtual machines on your ESXi images. What's great about, again, this Update Manager is the fact that this can be automated here as well by clicking the VMs and VAs tab or button up here. You'll notice if I do so that there are a number of baselines here that do just exactly what is required in order to get us to that next version for the virtual machines. The first is a VMware Tools upgrade to match the host. The second is a VMware hardware upgrade to match the host. And the third is a VA upgrade to whatever the latest is. So just like with the other baselines, these can be applied not to hosts, but to virtual machines, so that once the host is actually at the correct version, the virtual machines can then be backfilled with whatever appropriate VMware Tools and VM hardware upgrade baselines are required to get them to the right version. Really slick stuff here with Update Manager here in version 5. And I think you'll find that if you're at the earlier versions and you're ready to make the update, well, this whole process is going to be fairly significantly easier than what you've seen in the past. And all of this is a testament really to VMware's reliance on the baseline structure and how those baselines are being kept in compliance between the hosts that you have. Again, really slick solution. So over this series, we had a really good opportunity here to click through and to see all of the different elements that are required in order to get essentially nothing up into a complete and fully functional instance of vSphere with all the ESXi hosts and the vCenter server that you need. We spent some time here understanding what the architecture of the whole thing was, and then worked on the vCenter server and ESXi before we went through all of the different configurations that were required to bring our first virtual machines online. It takes about, as you can see here, about half of this entire series, as I've said before, to get to the whole point where we can bring on virtual machines. Once those virtual machines can be brought online, it begins to make sense to add in clusters and resource pools so that we can begin the high availability and the load balancing feature set that we're really looking for out of our vCenter environment. After that, then we went through all of the different additional topics that are required that you're going to want to add in for the complete and holistic management of your vCenter environment. That's clones and templates and the backup and restore topic and updating and profiling and all of the extra stuff that I think you will find are very important points of your vCenter environment. I hope that you feel that you've left this series really having learned plenty about how vCenter works and how you can actually make it successful in your environment and for the business that you're trying to run with the workloads on top of vCenter. At the end of the day, what your business is interested in are the workloads it's running on top of vCenter. But ultimately, it is your job to make sure that VMware and vSphere work effectively. Once again, my name is Greg Shields, and it's been an absolute joy to be able to work with you. Once again, this has been yet another CBT Nuggets series, this one titled Mastering VMware vSphere version 5. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.